I think we can underestimate how much stuff outside of the obvious things like work and responsibilities can actually be draining us. And that's because stress isn't just about being busy, it's about where your energy is going. And if you're constantly giving your power away to the wrong things, then no wonder you're drained. But the good news, you can stop it. Welcome to this new episode of Voice Notes from Samio. In this episode, I'm going to be sharing ways that you can stop giving your power away to help reduce stress in your daily life so that you can protect your peace. So number one is to stop putting everyone else before yourself. I know a lot of people don't like this one, especially if you've got responsibilities and people that you take care of. But I always like to use the oxygen mask analogy on the plane. You can't fit someone else's oxygen mask until you fit your own. Now, I understand there's degrees of this. Like if you're responsible for another human, for example, of course, feed them, look after them, take care of them. But I think the problem lies when we end up in this martyrdom type energy where we've got so used to putting everybody else's needs above our own that we're always second, third, fourth, fifth, basically last on the rung. And this can be extremely exhausting, especially long term. Of course, life ebbs and flows. There might be times you have to give a little bit more than you may be getting. But I think when this is a chronic problem and it goes on for a long time, this can be extremely draining. And we almost need to train ourselves back into putting ourselves first. I think especially for women in society, there is a lot of praise around being so self-sacrificial. And you almost hear it praised like, oh wow, look at how selfless this person is. But I heard someone mention this recently in a TikTok. I wish I'd saved it because I'd love to reference it directly. But I just remember this person was saying the word in itself, selfless, just doesn't actually sound good. It's not appealing. It sounds like there's less of self. And who actually wants that? You want to be in touch with yourself, your own needs. And so I think coming back to that is really important. A lot of the time, especially in our society, it's easy to be running on empty pretty much because you're giving all the time, but not really coming back to you and your own needs. And so I think occasionally it's really important to tap back into that because it can be a way that your energy is being drained without you realizing. And also realizing that it is okay to put yourself first sometimes, because in cultivating that energy for yourself, you'll in turn actually have more energy to then give to other people and those around you, and it's going to make you a more pleasant person to be around and as someone that can show up at full capacity when needed, rather than when you're running on empty because you're completely drained because you're just constantly giving your energy to everybody else. And I know for a lot of people, especially if you are used to putting everyone else first, you can then end up feeling guilt when you do try to then put yourself first or try and meet your own needs first. And so that can then feel like you're getting drained more because then you're worrying and you're feeling guilty. But you really do need to take that time to implement that practice of really taking care of yourself and putting yourself first when needed, because the more you do it, the more you'll realize that you can actually show up better. And like I say, that can be really hard initially, but you really do have to practice that and putting in place those boundaries and giving yourself some time to be able to recharge. And in doing that, you'll realize over time that it's actually the least selfish thing because you're able to give much more to those around you and also give your best self because you're not trying to fill from an empty cup. And I think a sub point of not putting everybody else before yourself is to stop giving everyone access to you, because if you've got into the habit of your needs coming last, it's really easy to just also find yourself last in the queue in all areas. And so when people in life want things from you, you might find yourself in a space where you're just giving. And it's important to realize that not everyone deserves that access from you. And you know what, even if they do deserve that access from you, it's also okay to be like, not today. This rolls on nicely to number 2. And this is to stop being a slave to your phone. I was with a friend not too long ago and her phone kept flashing up. And I was like, what is that? And she said, the news. And I was like, you have notifications on, alerts in real time of just all the bad stuff that's going on. And she was like, yeah, I should probably turn that off. And I was like, yeah, I think you should. Because fair enough, you might want to keep up to date with what's going on. But I don't know in what world, unless it's a part of your job, you need to know on the hour, every hour, what terrible thing is going on in all parts of the world. If that isn't a recipe for stress, then I do not know what is. And the news aside, even just the constant stress of the alerts from social media, emails and messages, and now you might not initially think these are bad, and granted, everybody deals with these things differently. You might not be as stressed out by these things, but I know for me personally, if I'm constantly seeing notifications flash up on my phone, it's kind of like an impulse to go and check them. It's kind of like, oh, what's on the other side? What if it's something important? And so just not having them on has been helpful for me. And then I'll check my emails when I decide to, essentially. Again, I understand this might differ depending on your job, but there's a high likelihood that you have, I'm going to guess here, I'm going to guess that maybe 80% of your emails are absolute nonsense. And I don't know what your job is, but I always think if someone needs you urgently, they will call you. I feel like emails and this demand that you have to respond right away has just got out of hand. I will respond when I'm ready and when I've read the email. And even sometimes if I've read the email, if I'm busy, I will reply at a later time. Again, I understand depending on what your job and the level of importance of these emails, it may differ, but the way our notifications have trained us like a dog whistle, it is actually scary. And notifications full stop, I keep my phone on Do Not Disturb 90% of the time. I think I have it automatically from 8 p.m. till 8 a.m. I think I'm going to lower that actually because I ain't taking any calls after 7 if I'm being honest. I go to bed so early. So I have it automated. And then generally day to day, I actually keep my phone on Do Not Disturb because I just find it very distracting. Again, I realize everybody has different levels with this. But if I'm, say, in the middle of filming this video right now and my friend sends me a WhatsApp, the impulse of me to go and check that is going to be so high. Even if I don't need to, even if it's not important, I'm going to at least want to have a little glance, do you know what I mean? And again, it might not be something stressful, but you also don't know when it is going to be something stressful. And then you might be thinking, okay, well, if I have these notifications turned off, then what if I miss something important? Again, I'm pretty sure in those scenarios, someone will ring you. And I have it set up personally that I'm like, should I expose this? Because I might have friends keep ringing me. But you can set it up, or at least I do, where if someone rings more than 2 times within a 5 minutes or something like that, the call will come through, because generally if an emergency is going on, someone's going to keep trying to call you, right? So that is like a foolproof way to keep my mind at ease that if someone needs to get hold of me, they can. But if they don't need to get hold of me, they ain't gonna. And especially since having the Do Not Disturb on, it has just made me so much more peaceful, especially as someone who's very easily distracted. And once I get out of flow, then I'll be stressed because then I'll feel behind. And you see the cycle here. And again, it comes back to that not always allowing access to you. You don't have to be always readily available all the time. And constantly having these notifications going can just have you on hyper alert without you realizing. So just being mindful of that can be very, very helpful, because that's just a little thing that can be running in the background that can actually be stealing our peace more than we realize. Number 3 is to have a pause before you react rule. This one ties in nicely with the previous one where we talked about emails and messages and we don't know what we're going to receive. I'm not going to lie, I have struggled with this before, and implementing this rule for myself has been very helpful, because sometimes a message, a tone, an email, whatever it may be, can just rub you up the wrong way. And I am someone who can get a little bit heated. Like, I can go from 0 to 100, and I will admit that about myself. But something I've realized that is very helpful is to take a step back, take a chill pill and take a pause, because what might be a 10 for you in that immediate moment might literally be a 2 for you in like at least 5 minutes, okay? And sometimes some things you might need to give yourself a day, because I know personally I can stew on things. And if something is rubbing me up the wrong way, I can not think of any other way to respond except a little bit passive aggressive and sarcastic. And 9 times out of 10, I'm going to regret that response at a later date. So I think just taking a step back, taking a pause can be really helpful. And that is ultimately protecting your peace, because you are regaining that control by reacting straight away. You're giving your power away, you're giving your energy away, because again, that just opens up from a response from the person, whoever's on the other end of the email, message, whatever it is. Who knows, you might end up in a heated debate back and forth. You might not even hear back, and then you might be stressing about the response that you've given, because when the regret creeps in and you're thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that, then you can start ruminating and worrying and thinking, oh, I wish I could put the toothpaste back in the tube, but we all know you can't put toothpaste back in a tube. So giving yourself that distance from it and giving yourself that time to reflect. If you're still mad after a day or two, go ahead. You can go in. I'm going to say act accordingly. Have a little think about that. But most of the time, I'm going to say 90% of the time, you probably won't have that level of anger or animosity to the situation. And so I think giving yourself that pause before reacting rule can really help protect your peace. And I think for scenarios in real life, being honest and either saying, I just need a timeout right now, or give me some time, let me think on this and I'll get back to you, is a really good way to help protect your peace, give yourself time to reflect and go back with an answer or response or whatever it is that you need to give said person once you've had time to mull over things, rather than giving your immediate response. Because I think just giving yourself that space can be just like putting a fire extinguisher on a fire, and it can really protect some damage from being done, shall we say. Like I say, if you still feel the same in a day or two or a week or whatever it may be, go ahead. But at least if you're giving yourself that time to reflect, you've given yourself that opportunity to protect your peace. Number 4 is to stop trying to be the fixer and to stop inserting yourself in other people's drama. We all know someone or have met someone or been around someone before who seem to be perpetually in some level of drama in some way, and it can be all too easy to offer a lending hand or offer an ear. But I think when the cycle continues and continues again, you really need to get out of there. And I'm not saying you necessarily need to cut this person off, but I think being boundaried with these scenarios can be very helpful. Now, this might look like averting discussion to other things when they bring up said topics, but it can even be simple as saying, look, I know you're having trouble with this person or this scenario, but have you thought maybe either speaking to them about it or removing yourself from this situation entirely so that you don't end up in this circle? And don't get into the trap of trying to fix someone's problems. This can be easier said than done. I am a recovered fixer, shall we say. Use the term fixer lightly. I don't think you can really fix anyone. It's up to them to do the work they need to do or make the choices to help their own situation. But I always wanted to help people and was trying to be in this sort of hero mode, as they call it, where people would come to me with problems and I'd be constantly searching for the solutions. And don't get me wrong, if a friend or someone comes to you with advice and they ask you for your honest opinion, I'm like, by all means, if you want to, help that person. But I think the problem then lies when it's the same person with the same problem on repeat. And it can be very draining for you, especially if you're in this fixer role, if you're constantly trying to solve the problem for them and they're not really doing that for themselves. And so it's important to be aware and mindful of this. And like I say, you don't always need to cut people out. I mean, unless they are super toxic and you want to, then go ahead. I don't think you should feel obliged to keep everyone in your life just because they've been around for however long. But if they are people that you still want in your life, this is when you really need to implement some boundaries by either telling them that you don't want to talk about these things or by simply not giving them that level of access to do so. And this will look different for different people in different scenarios, but just realizing that it's not your responsibility is really important. People ultimately need to learn their own life lessons on their own. I know it's funny, I'm literally sharing life lessons in this video, but it's not up to me whether you implement the things I share. These are just things that have helped me. That is up to you to do with it what you want, and it's the same for other people. And I think for many of us, especially if it's people you care about, you just can see so much potential in people sometimes, and you want them to be happy and live their best life and all that good stuff. But it's really not down to you. I recently have started reading Mel Robbins' book, Let Them, and I wrote down a couple of quotes from that, which just tie in with this perfectly. I'm literally like a chapter in, and I'm like, oh, I love this book already. So yeah, be prepared for more quotes from this book probably. One of the quotes I wrote, you acknowledge that others' actions and choices are not yours to control, and in doing so, you reclaim your emotional freedom. And then a couple of paragraphs down, when you say let them, you're not giving up and walking away. You're freeing yourself. You're releasing that grip you have on how things should go and allowing them to unfold the way they will go. So just thought I'd share those couple of quotes there. I've not finished the book yet. I'll let you know what I think when I get to the end. But so far, some very good gems in there. Number 5 is limit over explaining and justifying. This was a big one for me. And I did a video on this topic last year. It's called The Courage to Be Misunderstood. Because for the longest time, I would over-explain myself, and I guess it was a people-pleasing mechanism, essentially, because I always felt like I really needed to explain myself if I didn't want to do something. But it's remembering that no is a complete sentence. And I understand sometimes we don't want to just say no because it seems rude. I understand you have to add on a few more words. But you can do that without having to share your life story, that your dog's been sick, that Betty down the road has had a hip replacement and you got to go to the shop and get her shopping. I don't have a neighbour called Betty. Well, not that I know of. But you know what I mean? Like sometimes you can just not want to do something and that is completely justified. And again, in general life, you don't have to explain every choice you make. Some people are going to understand you and accept you and some people aren't. And some people are going to love you and still at times not understand you. And that is completely okay as well. I think we give away so much of our power when we're in this constant over-explaining mode, because ultimately we can go to the end of the earth trying to explain ourselves, and sometimes for some people they're just not going to hear it anyway. So you may as well protect your energy and protect your peace and not overexert yourself with that. Number 6 is to master the art of leaving early. Sometimes it's okay to just go. You don't have to backdoor it. You don't have to do some stealth ducking out. And on the other side of things, you don't have to stay around in a scenario where you're feeling completely drained if you want to go. I was always the latter, the stay to the end type girl. And now I really check in with myself. And if I'm not feeling something, I will leave, and it's okay to say that. You don't have to over-explain, and it doesn't even always mean that you don't like the vibe or the energy of the people that you're with. Sometimes you're just tired and you've met your full capacity for that day and you need to go home and have a lie down. It doesn't actually matter what you need to go and do, and that ties into it as well. You don't have to give loads of excuses. Oh, I need to go because I've got X, Y, Z. You can simply say, I have to go now. It's like the no is a full sentence, but with a few more words. And the more you practice that, the easier it becomes. Don't feel like you always need to be the life of the party or stay around in environments that drain you just to be polite. It is okay to say your piece and leave. Number 7 is to focus on what you can control and let go of what is out of your power. This is something I am currently practicing myself, I'll have you know, and it feels quite good. I think this also ties into the book that I said I've been reading, and much of the let them theory touches on this, but ultimately focusing on the things that you can control is very empowering, because worrying about what you can't control will have you spiraling. And I laugh because I know and I've been there. So we are not doing that anymore, okay? No more spiraling. But in all seriousness, focusing on what you can control over what you can't just gives you so much freedom and more peace, because it's ultimately realizing that, okay, I can't control everyone else around me, every scenario, but what can I control? I have autonomy over myself and my own decisions. And so what can I do in this scenario? An example could be with goals, for example. I, in the past, used to put a lot of emphasis on the outcome. So the goal would ultimately be the results. And of course, it's nice to have these big, lofty goals. I'm not saying don't do that, but when we take action towards said goal, focusing on the things that we can control in that, such as how we show up towards said goal, is what is actually going to help us keep that momentum and keep moving forward. And it's going to ultimately protect our peace because we're not going to be worrying about hitting said milestone at such a time. A big example of that for me is this podcast. I feel like I use this podcast as an example in every episode. And if you are enjoying this episode, by the way, please leave it a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps so much. And if you're watching on YouTube, please leave it a thumbs up because that's super helpful as well. But with the example of this podcast, I can't control how many people listen or watch. I can have desires and dreams of how many people listen and watch, but the thing that I can control is how I show up. So my main focus is to keep showing up, posting these episodes every week, and that is what I have control over. And so far, focusing on that has felt so good because in the past, I have dropped the ball with a lot of things. If you have been around on my YouTube for a while, for example, there's been more than a few times that I've popped up and then disappeared again. I've got sidetracked. I've worried about what's working, flip-flopping here, there, and everywhere. And even just having this mentality of focusing on what I can control has been very freeing, and it just creates a lot of peace for me. So you should try it. I highly recommend. Number 8 is to stop looking to social media to solve all your problems. Social media has become the filler of pauses, I'm going to call it. It's like, ooh, I'm bored, I'll have a scroll. Ooh, I'm sad, I'll have a scroll. Ooh, I'm stressed, I'll have a scroll. Ooh, I want inspo. I'll go on there and see if I can get any ideas. Ooh, I'll have a problem. Let me go on there for answers. Ooh, I'm happy. Let me share that. I went on a bit there, but you get the point. I think for the most part, most of us go on social media for entertainment, which essentially is what it is. Its main source is for that, shall we say. But we often don't realise how much of a crutch it is in any scenario. And again, going back to that being a slave to our phones thing, it's the easiest impulse to go towards when we feel feelings of discomfort for whatever reason. And the main one being boredom. It's kind of like, oh, I've got time to wait, I'll just check my phone. And I am not immune to this. I do this, but it is something that I've been a lot more mindful of over the past few years. And I'm constantly having to reset and re-come back to factory settings, shall we say, for myself with that. I've talked about in the past having social media breaks completely, which I find really helpful, and I still do like to do once in a while. But I think it also can lead us to looking outside of ourselves for a lot. Again, something I can be guilty with, especially when I'm struggling for inspiration. I find myself on social media. It's just the easiest place to go. But actually most of the time, my best inspiration comes when I'm just living life, especially in the shower. Shower thoughts are a thing, real. If you're stuck for answers, go have a shower. Or if I'm talking to a friend or reading a book. And I think we know that social media isn't a fix-all. Of course we know that. But I think being aware of our mindless scrolling, and maybe when we're feeling feelings of discomfort, it could be as minor as being bored. It could be as extreme as feeling sad. Oftentimes it's not going to solve all of our problems. And I'm obviously not saying get off social media. I'm a user of social media. I use it for my job. I guess we could kind of call this social media in some ways. And I do think there's many things to be learned and people are sharing some amazing things on there. But I think it's just being mindful of how much we tap into that. And actually it can be taking so much of our peace, especially with the algorithms these days and how we have very little control over what we see. It is a shame. Back in the day, it was great. You could really curate your feed and make it as positive or as aligned to you as you wanted. Whereas now, even if you follow certain people, the algorithm will just feed you random people that you don't know whether you like it or not. And sometimes this can be great and good and you discover new information and really inspiring people who you love to follow. And other times it can be not so great and it really does take away our power. We are at the mercy of these algorithms, but it's just being aware of our own mental state when we are tapping into these things and how much time we're giving to these things as well, because it can actually drain us at times more than we realize. And I think as well, a big part of it is there's so much information, there's so much that we take in that our brain can't actually really filter everything, or it can't actually digest all of the information. There are times when I'll send my husband TikTok videos, and it even happened the other day. I'd sent him some TikToks. 5 minutes later, he'd watched them, and he turned to me and was like, "Oh yeah, I just watched the TikTok you'd sent me." And I could not for the life of me remember what I just sent him 5 minutes ago, because by then I was already on the 10th TikTok. Let's be real, I was probably on the 25th TikTok, because I was just, mindlessly scrolling. I'd obviously thought in that moment whatever I'd sent to him was insightful or funny or entertaining or whatever. But my brain had obviously just taken that and then already thrown that information. And so, going back to protecting your peace in this scenario and giving away your energy, it's like filling up a cup with information. I actually wrote a note here to find some science behind this, but clearly didn't do my homework. But we're going to go through my very unscientific explanation, and I'm sure it'll make sense anyway. But it's like having a jar just full of stuff and you can't cram any more in because your brain is full. So how are you then able to think of new ideas or solutions, because you're just filled with all this other quite oftentimes useless information? And so sometimes we just need to take a pause, have a breather. And I think for anyone really, if you're feeling overwhelmed, taking that time out can be very helpful. Number 9 is to be selective about who gets your firsts and your lasts. This one is a big one, because who you interact with first thing in the morning and last thing at night can significantly impact your energy. Obviously, if you live with someone, it's usually who you live with. And if you live alone, it might be slightly different. But I think it's not just who you interact with, but it's how you interact with them, and being very aware of this. I know a lot of people don't like this, but I'm of the old school premise that people say, don't go to bed on an argument. And I know loads of people these days are like, screw that. If I'm mad, I'm going to sleep. He ain't getting none of my attention. But I am still of that old school mindset of don't go to bed on an argument. And I'm not saying that you need to try and resolve things quick or brush over things and be like, it's fine, and just carry on like everything's normal. I think there's a way to set aside an argument or, put a time out on it, agree to disagree, and we'll speak about this properly tomorrow, that kind of energy, rather than it being heated and bad vibes, shall we say. I feel like, especially if you share a bed with someone, who wants that neggy energy in your bed? Get out. Maybe you go make them stay on the sofa. Being serious for a moment, obviously this is very specific to being with a partner, but that is it just in one way that it can drain your energy. And I'm a big fan of sleep. Sleep is very important. If I have a bad night's sleep, I am barely functioning the next day. And I guarantee if you just resolve things to, at least some degree before going to sleep, or at least making amends or peace in that moment, you are going to sleep a lot better and feel a lot better, and know that you are going to resolve things, if you haven't already, at a later date. And so I'm very of that mindset. And the same when you are saying goodbye to people, try not to leave things on an argument, because it's like a program in a computer running in the background. You might be thinking, I don't want to speak to this person again. And in some scenarios, you might not want to. That is absolutely fine. But with any conflict for people that you do think you want to maintain in your life, whether it's work colleagues or friends or a partner, thinking about how you leave things can be very important, because if you feel like things have been left on a sour note, it can really eat away at your peace and your energy, because you might be worrying about it in the background. And so again, just like with the partner thing, if you can't resolve it all there and then, you can at least try and agree to talk about things properly in the future. Again, it's a bit like that rule of allowing yourself to calm down before you respond. You might need a timeout, and that's completely fine. But that's a very different energy than ending or leaving things on a huge argument. And I understand this isn't always possible, but being mindful of it when it is possible, and if the other person reciprocates to it, because obviously it takes two to tango. And of course, if someone is super toxic in your life and this is a reoccurring pattern, then maybe it's time to look at distancing yourself from that person. But if this is not the norm and it's robbing you of your peace, even just trying to reach out and being like, can we talk about this thing next time? Because, I'm not happy with how we left it. And hopefully that can help you reclaim some of that energy. In general, the first people you interact with in the morning and how you interact with those people, and the last people you interact with at night and how you interact with those people significantly impacts your peace. So choose wisely. Number 10 is to designate yourself worry time. This is as simple as it sounds. Give yourself an allotted time to go to town worrying about all the things, worry about everything I've mentioned in this list, the friendships, the drama, the friends drama, Betty down the road, the news, social media, worry about it all, but set a timer. Now you might be thinking, but I'm a worrier all the time. Well, this is a way to kind of try and give it its space, but keep it in a confined space, shall we say, and not seeping into all areas of your life all day, every day, because that is just going to be the biggest drain on your energy. And of course, this is something that will take practice, but set yourself a timer if you need to and go to town with it. You might want to give yourself 10 minutes. You might want to give yourself half an hour. But in that time of rumination and worrying and thinking things over for the 11th time, some of the things might be just random things that have just come up for you that day. Other things might be reoccurring patterns of things that have been coming up for you long term. And when your alarm goes off, when your worry time is done, you either forget about it and move on, or you take action and change something. And I know in some scenarios, this is easier said than done. It depends, again, how much control you have over the scenario. But it does go back to that step of focusing on what you can control. In a scenario where you feel completely out of control, are there any actions you can implement to take control of yourself in the situation? And if one thing good can come out of this designated worry time, it can be seeing the patterns that occur in your worrisome thoughts, shall we say, because if the same things are coming up over and over again, that might be a very big sign that you need to implement some action there or some life changes. And so this can be really, really helpful. Again, it takes practice. It's not easy, but it's kind of just giving yourself that space. I'm someone who likes to journal every morning. I don't necessarily call this my worry time as such, but I know that if I have any ruminating thoughts, they're going to come out on that page first thing in the morning. And oftentimes I have seen so many patterns in my thinking from journaling over time and things that have affected me. And so it's allowed me to make changes in my life by seeing those reoccurring themes. So actually giving yourself these designated spaces to ruminate, journal out your thoughts, you can start to see the patterns. And then from that, you can make some changes so that they don't have to rob you of your peace moving forward. Number 11 is to ditch the hustle guilt. I think when you're working on something or trying to build something, it's so easy to get into this grind mode. I have definitely been there recently. I spoke about it in the last episode about approaching burnout and having to restructure things. It's what kind of led me to think about this episode actually, because I really started thinking about how I was going to protect my peace again, because I realized I'd just not been focused on it. And especially when you're in these periods of productivity, it's important to remember that rest is productive. You can't be your optimum self if you don't give yourself rest and time for recuperation. And that's not just having an early night and going to bed. It's even giving yourself time out during your waking hours that aren't doing a job or a task or exerting your energy in some way. Because I got to the point where I was only switching off when I was going to the gym, which is ridiculous because I might not be using my mind in the gym or in the capacity that I'm talking about here. But as I call it, I feel like I'm a Neanderthal in the gym. I just feel like I'm just throwing around weights. And so I might be switching off from work in those scenarios, but I'm not resting because I'm still doing something. It's still a physical exertion. And then I was coming back from the gym and being like, okay, I need to be productive. I need to think, I need to plan, I need to film and do all of these things. And that is not even me. I am a self-care girly. I love to indulge in rest and me time. So even for someone who that generally would come natural to, it was so easy to quickly slip into that habit of grind mode I actually hate that term, but I keep using it recently. And so remember to give yourself permission to relax without feeling guilt or feeling like you're going to slip behind, because that time off usually is what you need to be able to show up as your best self. Again, it goes back to point number one about putting yourself first. It's very easy to feel like we need to show up for others or to show up for our business or to show up for the household or whatever it is that we're managing or dealing with or juggling. But we ultimately need to come home to ourselves occasionally too and give ourselves that respite and relaxation that we need in whatever way works for us, because that is so valuable and that is ultimately going to bring us so much peace. And that leads on perfectly to the last point. Number 12 is to curate a personal reset ritual. This is going to look very different to different people. And so this is why it's something that you can curate and do for yourself. I've seen people create or curate menus for different things. Like I've seen people do it for a dopamine menu. So you could do this type of thing for a rest and reset menu. And ultimately what that would look like is you creating a list of go-to things that you know really relax you and calm your mind. It could be reading a book. It could be going for a walk. It could be sitting and watching trash TV. I know a friend who loves reality TV, and that will be her ultimate switch off, zone out, relaxation. And so you need to figure out what it looks like for you, because ultimately, with all this being said, we can implement all these steps, but sometimes life is going to get on top of you. Things are going to stress you out. Things are going to ruin your peace and all of that, but we need something to be able to come back to so that we can reset and feel good for ourselves. And I think that's where having a menu or a list can be very helpful, because it might sometimes be a walk, but if you're also physically exhausted as well as mentally exhausted, the last thing you want to do is use more physical energy. And so another one might be taking a bath. Sometimes you might not have time to have a bath, so another one might be just 10 minutes of meditation. And so having a menu or a list of things allows you to refer to them in times where you just need to reset and come back to yourself so you can dip in and out of the menu. One of my favorite things that I like to go to, it is like my ultimate reset button. Not gonna lie, your girl likes a nap. I'll be napping at any time of the day. If I am peak stressed, I'll have a nap. I mean, I don't even need to be stressed to have a nap, to be honest. I know it's a privilege to be able to take a nap during the middle of the day. I appreciate that. No kids, works for themselves from home. But that is mine. That is my little thing that I do for myself. I will set a timer for my sweet spot is like 45 minutes. I'll put on some binaural beats. Love that. Love those vibes. I will be out like a light and I will just get into a really deep sleep. Some people don't like napping because I know they wake up and feel groggy afterwards, but I just feel like I've reset myself on it. That is my reset button. So that is my ultimate indulgence for myself, my personal reset. I also find reading a book really helps. And this year I've been getting into reading much more and I'm loving it. And that's one that I can do a lot easier and a lot quicker. Even sometimes just reading for 5 to 10 minutes can really help me to relax. I can literally feel my nervous system relaxing and I feel so peaceful, I think as well, because I can't worry when I'm reading, but maybe you can. That is a skill that I am yet to master. And so having something there to hand that is enjoyable to read. I've been reading a lot of fiction this year and really enjoying it. And just having those 5 to 10 minutes of escapism where my brain can't think of anything else. I'm not thinking about working. I'm not thinking about problems or worries or other people's worries or who needs me when for what. And it works wonders how much just even a small amount of reading can do for me. But like I say, it's very personal. You need to tap into what feels good for you, because what feels good for one might not feel good for another and vice versa. But having that little list of things that you can go to when you need to reset can be so helpful and a nice little tool to tap into. So those were just some ways you can stop giving away your power, protect your peace, protect your energy, regain some of that control and just feel more peaceful in your day-to-day life. So remember to let go of what you can't control and focus on what you can. And another little Mel Robbins quote to close us out here, because I like this one. Focus on yourself because that's where your true power lies. That's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed. I have thoroughly enjoyed chatting your ear off as always, and I will speak to you next time.